This dog was neglected for years and eventually grew an unbelievable amount of hair that became a heavy burden to bear in every sense. Then, someone came along and finally gave him a haircut that showed his true identity. The city of Tennessee holds so much natural beauty. From Great Smoky Mountains to beautiful streets and streams nestled in pockets throughout the state. Unfortunately, in this same city was a barn with a much darker side. Here, there was no single trace of light, nor was there enough space for movement. Sadly, it was here that one dog, Lazarus, lived, with no hope of ever making it out alive. The 7-year-old Pyrenees dog had been in the barn for 6 years and lived a life of terror and discomfort. Since it was just him in the barn, he didn't have anyone to talk to or play with. He didn't enjoy cuddles and kisses like other lucky dogs out there. He didn't even know how soothing a hug from a human friend could be. Yet this dog hung on to his dear life, making the most of it. But things were really bad for this animal here. The barn where he lived was filled with feces, so there wasn't enough space for the animal to move around. And because he often sat in a spot, he didn't know how to walk. But would he ever learn how to do that? Since Lazarus also had to fend for himself most of the time, he often ate from his own waste. And you won't believe what this animal did when he finally got real food. You see, Pyrenees dogs usually have double undercoats. Once they aren't groomed properly, it leads to matting, which results in skin issues. Sadly, this was the terrible fate that befell Lazarus. As years passed, his fur kept accumulating, and by the time he was 7, it had already grown to an astonishing mass, weighing a whopping 35 pounds. Wow, no animal deserves to live in such a condition. Poor Lazarus had no one to pull him close during all these times. No one cared or loved him. There was not a single soul to say, "Don't worry, everything is going to be fine and you are going to be okay soon." But apart from all this, one thing was even more important. Lazarus needed to get help as soon as possible. Yet days flew into nights and this animal remained confined. There was not even a glimpse of hope. So didn't this animal have an owner? Why would anyone leave their animal to such a sad fate? Well, he did. And his owner's story is also quite disheartening. This man's name was Lawrence. During his mid-30s, Lawrence was living his best life. He also loved touring and had seen some of the beauties the world had to offer. He had a great job too. There was also something very sweet about this man. He loved animals, especially dogs. In fact, when he was 35, he found a stray dog who had suffered a hit and run. While every other person just drove past the poor dog, Lawrence got down from his car, picked the animal up, and rushed her to the vet. This man even shed tears on his way there. He hated seeing animals suffer. Luckily, he got to the vet just in time, and the pup got the much-needed treatment. This is only one of his numerous kind acts towards animals. So how did someone who loved dogs so deeply leave his dog in such a state of misery? Well, brace yourself, because what you are about to learn will leave you teary. You see, Lawrence was quite lucky to find love during his teenage years. The two began dating when Nicole turned 16. By then, Lawrence was 18. As they grew, their relationship also deepened. Surviving all odds and opposition, Lawrence's parents weren't in support of the relationship, and Lawrence had to fight for their love. Despite the harsh treatment Nicole got, none of these made her love Lawrence less. Nicole was Lawrence's safe spot, and she was his superwoman. Years later, when Lawrence was 23, he proposed to Nicole and she accepted. Unfortunately, that was when a tragedy befell them. The two were on a road trip when a careless driver suddenly rammed into them. It was this accident that claimed Nicole's life, and Lawrence blamed himself for it. He wished he could have done something, even if there was really nothing he could do. After this incident, his life fell apart. He couldn't concentrate at work, and soon he was laid off. Gradually, he slipped into depression, and his mental health suffered greatly. However, before his mental health went down the drain, he purchased Lazarus and kept him in the barn. He would often give him food from time to time, but this man didn't let Lazarus out. He was no longer thinking right, so he was scared if the dog went out, he would lose his life too. He thought confinement was the only way to save his dear animal. As the months passed, Lawrence's health worsened, and he couldn't help himself. How much more his sweet dog? Poor fellows. Fortunately, a miracle happened when one man, Fred, moved next door. He noticed Lawrence would sometimes go to Lazarus's barn and would throw some food and water. What or who exactly was inside there? Fred wondered. Then one day he went to the barn and he heard Lazarus barking slightly. He couldn't believe a dog had been there all the while. He quickly rushed to the door to let Lazarus out, but the entrance was filled with feces and the man couldn't go in. At this point, I knew it was beyond my power, and I called animal rescuers immediately. After the call, the rescuers from the big fluffy dog team rushed to the barn immediately. but none of them were prepared for the heart-wrenching sight they were able to see. Even Lazarus didn't suspect the moment he had been waiting for had finally come. The rescue team included 2 groomers who would soon be giving their best to turn Lazarus's life around. When the team got to the barn, they had to use shovels to remove the feces blocking the entrance, all in a bid to save the sweet dog. Lazarus was now very close to freedom. Finally, after several minutes of shoveling, the door flung open, and for once in 6 years, light filtered into the barn. The rescuers rushed in and came face to face with Lazarus. Immediately we saw him. The shovel I was holding fell off my hands. I have never seen a dog look that way. Despite the matted hair, his eyes still shone so brightly, and I saw hope in them. It was as if he had been waiting for a day like this, one of the rescuers said. When they finally walked up to the dog, they noticed he already had some health problems and he couldn't even walk. My first question was, would he ever find the strength and courage to walk again? Would he heal from all he had been through? Another rescuer said. Now that they had come to the rescue, the team began their work. They took Lazarus with them to the animal shelter and started cutting off all those filthy hairs. You won't believe what this dog eventually looked like after his transformation. It took hours to groom the dog, who initially was uncomfortable and scared of the rescuers. However, once they had removed all the fur from his neck, he warmed up to the rescuers. He knew they meant him no harm and only wanted to help. Finally, the team cut off the last strand of fur and gave Lazarus a long and warm bath. When the fur finally dried off, there was not a single dry eye in the animal center that evening. Lazarus had been completely transformed. Beneath that sad dog with matted hair was this sweet, handsome, and lovely boy. Lazarus looked so good that everyone took pictures of him and proudly showed him off. Despite this, there were also other downsides. For instance, Lazarus didn't adjust to the outside world on time. Lazarus doesn't know how to be a dog. He doesn't exactly behave like a dog. Gene Morrison, the founder of the animal rescue team, said, "Of course, everyone was patient with the furry animal, and he soon learned. More so, when he ate his first real meal, he was so conscious and careful. He ate a grilled steak consciously. He was so shy. Dogs shouldn't have to be grateful for food, and this made us so sad. Luckily, the dog's days of suffering are now over." Lazarus was later taken to Virginia, where he lived with his foster mom, Chasha Lindsay, who works with Big Fluffy Dog Rescue, a non-profit organization. The loving woman helped Lazarus regain his strength. At first, Lazarus had to think before taking any step, but now he plays, walks, and runs like any happy dog living his best life. No one would believe he had such a rough start in life. I am so happy for this dog.